Beneath the headlines, behind the timelines, there is a story no one wants you to find. Welcome to some unapproved thinking, where forgotten truths, buried patterns, and invisible systems rise to the surface. You weren't crazy. You were just early. Let's begin.
The Montauk Project claimed the U.S. government experimented on children in an underground base. You're watching a show about it right now, and you think it's fiction. The entire time, you have no idea how close the writers got to actual classified documents that still, to this day, the federal government refuses to fully declassify. In fact, the show was originally titled Montauk. That was the working title the Duffer Brothers pitched before Netflix renamed it Stranger Things. That detail alone should tell you something. This isn't a theory. This is a side-by-side breakdown of what Netflix put on screen versus what the Montauk Project actually was, and the parts they got exactly right, the parts they invented, and the parts they left out because reality was too dark for prime time. You are about to hear some unapproved thinking.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Dark Horse Entrepreneur Podcast. Unlock your potential with the Dark Horse Entrepreneur AI Escape Plan, the podcast empowering hardworking parents to break free from the 9-to-5 grind through AI-powered side hustles. Check them out at darkhorse-entrepreneur.com. Now back to the show.
Let's start with the most obvious parallel, the underground base itself. Stranger Things depicts Hawkins Lab as a sprawling, multi-level facility beneath a small town, hidden from the public eye, operated by the Department of Energy with a facade of innocence. Camp Hero, the real installation at Montauk Point on the eastern tip of Long Island, existed from the 1960s forward. It was officially a radar station, specifically the AN FPS 35, part of the SAGE radar system, a massive Cold War-era early warning installation whose antenna tower still stands today in Camp Hero State Park. That's what they told people. Federal records confirm the base was real. The cover story has never been harder to believe. Here's what the show got right: the layered architecture. Real testimonies from Montauk survivors, people who've come forward despite decades of silence, describe subterranean tunnels, corridors that seem to extend far beyond the base's official boundaries, and rooms with purposes that were never explained, even to the staff clearing them. One former worker, Preston Nichols, who filed affidavits with the U.S. Patent Office, described being taken deeper into the facility than he was meant to go. Down there, he says, were isolation chambers. And children. His accounts were later compiled alongside co-author Peter Moon in the 1992 book The Montauk Project: Experiments in Time, the primary source document for everything that followed. But the show compresses the timeline. Stranger Things begins in 1983. The Montauk Project, if we trust the available documentation and whistleblower accounts, didn't reach its active phase until the late 1970s. Roughly parallel, yes, but the show's narrative suggests a sudden emergence. The real history is slower, more deliberate, more terrifying because of it. Now, the experiments themselves. In Stranger Things, the focus is on Elle, a girl with psychokinetic and telepathic abilities created through deliberate genetic manipulation and trained from infancy to become a weapon. The show suggests the government wanted a remote viewer, a way to spy behind enemy lines without cameras or operatives. Totally plausible. And not without real-world precedent. The CIA's Project Stargate, a declassified remote viewing program that ran from 1972 to 1995, proved the government was seriously pursuing exactly that capability. But the documented Montauk agenda, according to the Preston Nichols testimony and corroborating accounts, was worse. Nichols named Duncan Cameron as the primary psychic subject at the center of the experiments, the real-world analog to 11, if you're mapping the fiction onto the testimony. Cameron, allegedly selected for his exceptional psychic sensitivity, was reportedly the individual seated in what became known as the Montauk Chair. The real goal, allegedly, was consciousness itself. Specifically, time manipulation through consciousness. Montauk allegedly used the SAGE radar array, that same AN FPS 35 tower, in conjunction with what's called a Montauk Chair, a device designed to amplify human psychic potential. The frequency of the radar system, operating at specific electromagnetic wavelengths, was said to be in resonance with the Earth's Schumann resonance. That's 7.83 hertz, the frequency the planet's magnetic field naturally oscillates at. Your brain, when it's in a deeply meditative or hypnotic state, operates at similar frequencies. Sync them together, the theory goes, and you don't just amplify telepathy, you allegedly bend causality. Now, the show couldn't put that on screen without losing its mainstream audience, so they simplified it. Superpowers? Yes. Time-bending weaponry? No. But the documents that exist, the patent applications, the Freedom of Information Act requests with redacted sections, the testimony of engineers who claim to have worked on the equipment, they describe electromagnetic frequency manipulation as the mechanism. Not magic, physics. Physics they claim works. This is where the show's fiction and reality split most dramatically. The upside down doesn't exist in the real Montauk narrative, but something like it does. According to accounts from people who claim to have been involved, the experiments were designed to create a kind of dimensional overlay, a space outside normal time, a place where consciousness could exist while the body remained unaware. Some testimonies use the term alternate timeline. Others call it a thought space. Alfred Bielek, another whistleblower who claimed involvement in both the Montauk Project and the earlier Philadelphia experiment, sometimes called Project Rainbow, used language that suggested these programs were connected, part of a longer lineage of government experimentation with time and consciousness. What any of it actually was, officially, the government has never stated, because officially, the Montauk Project never existed at all. Yet, here's the problem. The base is real. That's not conspiracy, that's public record. Camp Hero stood on Montauk Point for decades. It was decommissioned in 1996. The U.S. government has never explained what happened inside those walls during the periods in question. No official report, no investigation, no acknowledgement that experimentation of any kind occurred. Compare that to what Stranger Things does. The show depicts Hawkins Lab shutting down, burning, covering its tracks. Records destroyed. The town moves on. No federal inquiry, no prosecution. And here's the chilling part. That's not unrealistic. It's historically accurate to how the American government has handled exposed human experimentation. The MKUltra program, which involved CIA-sponsored experiments with LSD on unwitting subjects, went on for over 20 years before the truth emerged in the 1970s. It only came to light because of the Church Committee, the 1975 Senate investigation led by Senator Frank Church that forced the CIA to disclose decades of domestic surveillance and experimentation programs. Even then, the CIA's own director, Richard Helms, had already ordered MKUltra files destroyed in 1973, and even after the Church Committee exposed what remained, few people were ever prosecuted. The program simply became compartmentalized, renamed, and of course continued, just under new acronyms. The Montauk Project, if it existed as described, may have been MKUltra's logical endpoint. Not testing drugs on captive subjects, testing consciousness itself, testing whether you could turn the human mind into a weapon that operates outside the laws of physics. Sidney Gottlieb ran MKUltra for the CIA for over 2 decades. He died in 1999, never charged with a crime. That institutional impunity is the historical context the Montauk testimonies live inside. And the children? Let's address what the show does with Elle and the other test subjects. The Netflix version suggests they were kidnapped, taken from families, implanted, trained. Stranger Things implies trauma and loss, and the struggle for these children to be human again. The Montauk testimonies claim something quite different. Several accounts describe recruitment of gifted children, kids who showed early signs of psychic sensitivity. Some came from military families. Some were picked up by government agencies through education screening. The overall details are vague, fragmented, and contradictory because we're working with whistleblower testimonies, not court records. But a pattern emerges. These weren't just random abductions. Nope, they were systematic selections. Children were brought to the base, sometimes with parental consent or military authority, sometimes without either. Once inside, they were isolated, exposed to electromagnetic frequencies, subjected to what early accounts describe as consciousness training. Their memories, multiple whistleblowers claim, were altered, not through trauma, but instead through technological means. This is where the show actually softens reality. It presents memory loss as a side effect of horror. The documented Montauk accounts suggest memory manipulation was a feature, not a bug. A way to keep subjects compliant, a way to erase what they learned while inside. The show's 11 is allowed to escape, to remember, and to resist. The testimonies about real Montauk subjects suggest that option was never supposed to exist. The experiments were designed so that even if a subject left the base, they wouldn't remember what happened. They'd be walking repositories of classified research, unable to testify, and unable to even know what was done to them. But some did remember. Some did escape, or were released, or the program ended and they were left to piece together what had happened to them. Preston Nichols claims he was one. He claims to have recovered memories through hypnotherapy. He and Peter Moon documented those accounts across multiple books. He claims to have been targeted for silencing for decades, and he's never been arrested for perjury. He's never been sued by the government. He exists in this strange legal space, too credible to completely ignore, too implicated to fully dismiss. Duncan Cameron, similarly, gave accounts that aligned with Nichols in ways that are difficult to explain away as coordinated fiction between two people who had every reason to be discredited. The show leaves us with hope. Elle survives. She has powers. She gets out. Her story ends. The real Montauk story doesn't have an ending. It has a pause. It has decommissioning and official denial and decades of veterans slowly coming forward, their accounts aging into the public record, their stories corroborated by independent researchers and declassified documents that arrive in batches with sections still blacked out. And here's the part the show can't capture. The ambiguity. You don't know if Preston Nichols is telling the truth. You don't know if Duncan Cameron's recovered memories are genuine or constructed. You don't know if the base's real function was radar and Cold War defense, which is the official story, or something that used that radar for purposes the AN FPS 35's designers never intended. You don't know if the experiments were mild psychological studies or if consciousness was actually being weaponized. The government knows, and well, they're not talking. Stranger Things gives you the comfort of a narrative where the monster is real, the government is evil, but the good people survive and move on. Real history is way messier, and it's ongoing. The documents are still redacted. The survivors are still alive. The base is still visible on satellite imagery, and the radar tower is still standing in a state park where anyone can visit, and no one's entirely sure what it was. The show's final trap is this. It lets you enjoy the story of government conspiracy without confronting the silence of your own government today. Every time you watch Hawkins Lab on screen, you're watching a story about real institutions that operated without oversight, real power structures that hid human experimentation, real technology whose scope and application remain unknown. Project Stargate was declassified. MKUltra was exposed by the Church Committee. Those programs existed. The question is always what exists now that hasn't been exposed yet. And the question all this leaves you with, the one question that keeps you coming back, that seeds every comment section and every forum post, is this. How much of what we're told never happened is actually happening right now behind some other base's walls with some other technology we don't have names for yet? The Montauk Project may or may not have done what the testimonies claim. But something was happening at Camp Hero. That much is undeniable. The AN FPS 35 tower is still there. The tunnels, reported by multiple independent witnesses, have never been officially accounted for. And the government's refusal to clarify what that something was might be the scariest part of the story. Scarier than any monster, even scarier than any fictional superpower. Because as we all know, fiction ends. But, sadly, the cover-ups don't. This has been some unapproved thinking. Tracy, out. Next.
If this story didn't sit right with you, good. You're not here to be comforted. You're here to see what others overlook. Thanks for exploring some unapproved thinking. Learn more at someunapprovedthinking.com. New episodes drop weekly. Subscribe, share, and keep questioning, because the pattern's still playing out, and next time, we're going deeper.